All right, and it's a pleasure to be here today and just talk about prevention and early detection of dementia. Um, Honestly, though, I think these Provost Clubs are awesome for so many reasons when we think about prevention. So, as I go through the presentation today, just please take note and um, prepare to ask some questions afterwards. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. So to begin, I always like to give a sense of how many individuals are actually impacted by Alzheimer's disease in our community and nationwide. So 564,000 Canadians are currently living with dementia. 16,000 is the number of Canadians under the age of 65 living with dementia. And I do think that that is really important to note because oftentimes we associate these kinds of dementias with individuals who are over the age of 65. So just appreciating the fact that there are a number of individuals that are under the age of 65 living with this disease. 228,000 is the number of Ontarians living with dementia, and 937,000 is the number of Canadians who will be living with the disease in 15 years. In Grey Bruce alone, they predict that there's about 4,000 individuals with a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease or other dementia. But that being said, only about 1/3 of individuals actually seek a diagnosis. So the true number is probably closer to 11 or 12,000 individuals. And then you think about the number of individuals that are associated with that particular person. So it certainly does impact a great number of us. So what happens with aging? Well, normal changes are that we have trouble remembering names. It's never high enough for me, right? I've been doing Zoom for the past 3 years. Nobody knows how tall I am. So normal changes are we have trouble remembering names, trouble remembering lists of things. Right, that's we make our grocery list and then we may forget our grocery list. The spatial memory, finding your car in the parking lot. So perhaps you go to a mall or maybe a plaza for a full day, and then you're trying to remember, where did I park that car? And if we were younger, we'd have no problem finding our car at the end of the day. So 12% of individuals over the age of 65 have what we call a mild cognitive impairment. And I'll describe that a little bit in my next slide. 1 person in 5 among our population over 65 have significant memory problems. But the good news is that 4 out of 5 of us do not. So I did say that I would kind of elaborate a little bit on mild cognitive impairment. And I'm sorry that you can't see all you can see is the impairment piece because of the Zoom screen there. But so normal aging is that we have those changes in ability to recall information. But with mild cognitive impairment, what we note is that the individual starts to have subjective complaints, plus the family notices changes in the individual's memory. And there are some impairments evident in cognitive testing. So the cognitive testing is basically the memory testing that the doctor does at the office or at a memory clinic. So the distinguishing feature between normal aging, mild cognitive impairment, and dementia is that an individual has significant functional impairment. So things that a person would typically do all their life or has done for a long time, maybe check the oil in the engine of a car, now becomes more difficult for them. They can't figure out where to find that dipstick. Or even how to start the car can be an issue now too with the new vehicles that we have. So thinking about things that a significant functional impairment really does flag that the individual has a condition such as a dementia. So dementia is, and we often get this question of, what's the difference between a dementia and Alzheimer's disease? So dementia is the loss of memory, judgment, reasoning, the ability for an individual to function with their day-to-day activities. So those, in saying all of that, we say that that's a set of symptoms. So the symptoms, loss of memory, judgment, reasoning, call that a dementia. So with Alzheimer's disease, an individual has dementia, right? So Alzheimer's disease is the disease. Dementia is a set of symptoms that accompanies the disease. So what I would strongly encourage individuals to do, if you know of somebody or you yourself have complaints in regards to your memory, when you're speaking to the doctor, ask the doctor to elaborate a little bit. What are we looking at? If you're saying that I have a dementia, what might be the cause of this dementia? So is the cause due to a depression? Is it due to a metabolic disorder? Is it due to a nutritional deficiency? Is it due to maybe a medication that I've just been prescribed? So if that's the case, then we can treat this and make it better. We can function better. Or is it due to an irreversible cause? So are we looking at irreversible dementias? And those irreversible dementias are those such as Alzheimer's disease or Lewy body dementia or a vascular dementia or a frontal temporal dementia. And the list goes on and on and on in terms of those irreversible dementias. So this Venn diagram is just to give you a sense of how complicated it sometimes can be to actually determine what the cause of a dementia is, or what the diagnosis can be. So it could be that the individual has a mixed dementia. So not only do they have Alzheimer's disease, but they also have a vascular dementia. So then we call that a mixed dementia. So it's not always easy for a doctor to tell you, this is what you have. You have Alzheimer's disease or you have Lewy body dementia. Further investigation may be needed to have that. So the doctor may just say, well, you have a dementia, but ask the doctor. So are we looking at an irreversible dementia? Well, what are we looking at in terms of that dementia? So just probe them a little bit further. They may not be able to actually pinpoint what the cause is, but they will be able to say whether it's reversible or irreversible. So why is dementia a concern? So the good news, and there's bad news, of course. So the good news is the population is getting older. People are certainly living longer. The bad news, it also means that the number of people with dementia will increase because naturally with age, our risk of developing dementia does increase. So about 72% of people with dementia are women, and the cost to the healthcare system will certainly rise as a result of the number of individuals with the diagnosis. I did want to just give you this visual image of what the brain looks like of an individual with Alzheimer's disease, because I think it is, you know, we don't wear our brains out here, right? It's not visible that there's changes happening to the individual, like a broken leg. If we see somebody with a broken leg, we naturally open the door for that person because we see them walking with crutches. But if their brain is damaged in some way, we may not be able to or understand that we have to change the way that we communicate with this individual because of those changes that are happening to the brain. So it's not only is there, there's a structural change happening and a chemical change happening to this brain. So the person with the diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease, and this is a pretty severe later stage dementia that we see here, but the person with Alzheimer's disease is really, really trying hard to make sense of what still remains of their brain. So again, it's up to us to connect with this person. So when should we actually be worried? So about your memory loss or the memory loss of someone you know, it's really when they're forgetting plans or appointments, forgetting significant conversations that you've had with them, forgetting the month or they're forgetting the year, forgetting the names of close family members. That can certainly raise flags for us. And also remembering the fact that, you know, are they having difficulties with those activities of daily living, making themselves a cup of coffee and so forth. So just being aware of numerous changes in the individual and encouraging you or encouraging them to seek medical attention. It's kind of like if you found a lump on your body that wasn't there before, would you not seek medical attention? So if you're having difficulty functioning with your day-to-day activity, if you're not able to process or having difficulty finding the right words to use in a conversation or remembering conversations that you've had with others, the flags start to go up. Consult with your doctor. See if there's something happening there. Maybe perhaps there's something that could be treated, but certainly don't neglect it. So getting that diagnosis requires a good medical history, requires a mental status exam, which is that cognitive test or the memory test that I mentioned earlier, requires a physical exam, requires some laboratory tests, so maybe some diagnostic imaging to have a view of the brain. And some psychiatric or psychological evaluations may be necessary, not always. This is what the cognitive test looks like. It tests various areas of the brain to see how the individual is functioning. I do want to emphasize that it is a good, it takes about 10 minutes to complete the test. It's one of the indicators that they do to determine whether or not an individual has cognitive losses. But the other indicator is the fact that the doctor sits down with the individual and the care partner. So they're or friend, and they're interviewed separately to determine just how that person is functioning with their day-to-day activities. So that can be a huge one as well. So research, how do we make progress? Research basically is the only way. And in order to actually figure out how it is that we can determine how individuals get Alzheimer's disease is by people participating in research. So you can certainly sign up for memory testing or sign up and volunteer for research. And I did put a few websites up here. So you can go to the Alzheimer's Society of Canada, or you can do Baycrest Health Science Center in Toronto, also does significant amounts of research, and certainly public support to conduct that research. So this is probably, probably the down part of my presentation. One of the downer slides is we don't know the cause of Alzheimer's disease and or Lewy body dementia or frontal temporal dementia. We don't know those causes. And there really has not been any new Alzheimer's treatment in the past 20 years. So no disease modifying therapies. Now, there are a number of biomarkers, and those biomarkers may be to check amyloid, saliva, doing some PET scans to determine the beginnings of Alzheimer's disease. But the only way that you can actually, well, you can pay to have those tests done, but what does that mean to you? Because there's no treatment to stop the disease. So if you ask your doctor, can I have this test done? The doctor will probably say, well, no, because those tests are typically for research purposes, because we don't have any kind of medication to manage you before the diagnosis. So at the time of diagnosis, there are medications to keep you at a level of functioning. But, you know, if you were to get tested now without any symptoms being exhibited, we don't have anything to give you to stop it if there is something to signify that you're at risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. So what do we want? We want a magic pill. We want to be able to flip a switch. We want quick treatment to figure out how we can stop this disease. But as I mentioned, we don't have that. So what can we do? I guess in identifying that Alzheimer's disease is a chronic disease, it starts possibly 15 years before the actual diagnosis of the disease. It is a gradual onset. And as I mentioned earlier, tests are available to find evidence of changes in brain structure and changes in brain function, but not stop the pathology of the disease itself. So what is the alternative? So when I think about prevention of Alzheimer's disease, what's the alternative? Decrease the risk, delay the progression. So even if an individual does receive a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease, there's still a way that we can delay the progression of the disease. And that's basically looking for risk factors and thinking of these risk factors as when we identify the risk factor, each risk factor being a blow to the brain. So it's a punch to the brain and puts us at a higher risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. So the things that we have no control over are those non-modifiable risk factors. And those are things such as age. As I mentioned earlier, age increases our risk of developing dementia, doubles every 5 years after the age of 65. Genetics plays a part. There's a gene called the APOE4 gene that puts us at a higher risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. But having said that, 30% of dementias can be prevented just by our lifestyle choices. So don't get too hung up on the fact of genetics. Certain personalities, so whether you're an introvert or highly neurotic, puts you at a higher risk of Alzheimer's disease. Where you live. So there has been multiple studies on how close a proximity of a busy highway you may be. So the pollution could increase your risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. Head injuries, so whether you've been knocked out for a day, you're 3 to 4 times at risk of developing the disease. And then our cognitive reserve. So really just, how much of a cognitive reserve have we developed in our lifetime? And those are individuals, pretty much you've gotten quite an elaborate encyclopedia of information in your brains collected over time through education. And that helps to build your cognitive reserve, so that in the event that perhaps you do develop Alzheimer's disease later on in life, you have that cognitive reserve to rely on. So you can function for quite a long period of time on your cognitive reserve. So there's only 14 things that you can do to prevent dementia. So certainly just being aware to treat your medical problems. So, just consider if there's anything that your medications that need to be taken on a regular basis that are prescribed by your doctor, cardiovascular risk factors, so prevent strokes, high blood pressure, vascular risk factors. Certainly avoid diabetes and metabolic syndromes with obesity. So keeping ourselves in shape and active. Really, there's been a lot of studies on alcohol. So as much as we enjoy having our glasses of wine, it's probably best if we avoid alcohol as much as possible. And if you're relying on sedatives to help you sleep, stop. Think about something different to manage. Get exercise actually is the best prescription to help for a good night's sleep. So more and better sleep, they say about 7 to 8 hours of sleep. And you need to go through those cycles in order to clear out those toxic chemicals that are in your brain. Keep physically fit, exercise about 150 minutes a week. So if we did 30 minutes a day, we could certainly exceed those 150 minutes. So just ask yourself, can you limit your sitting and lying to 23 and a half hours a day? Right? And if you can, then great. Should be easily accomplished. Intellectual and cognitive stimulation. So belonging to groups such as this certainly does stimulate your brain. I hope that in attending this session and hearing me speak, that you are taking in this information and that you will go back and share with others what it is that you've learned from this session. Decreasing the amount of stress in our lives. Stress is interesting how it reacts in our body, and I think it is very, very important for us to be in tune to what our body is saying. So if you think back at a time when in your life when you were experiencing an extreme amount of stress, what particular, how did your body respond to that stress? How did your body respond emotionally? How did your body respond physically? And by taking note of that, when you're in another stressful situation, think about how it is that I can manage that stress or delay that stress. Because what happens is, as I mentioned, some stress can be good stress because it helps us accomplish things, but too much stress has those negative effects on our body, so negative that it actually causes our hippocampus to shrink. And this is the amazing part of our how our body reacts. So if we have prolonged periods of stress and that hippocampus is shrinking, which is responsible for our memory, by the way, then it's hard for us to function. It's hard for us to have conversation and remember what people are telling us. But if we eliminate that stress from our lives, if we're able to manage that stress, then what happens to our hippocampus? It actually returns. So making sure that we are managing our stress. that we have positive ways to control that. Treating depression, and I think that talk about stigma, we've done a really good job, I think, of talking about mental health. And you know, for a great number of you in the group today, you know, as we age, mental health becomes a very big concern. And I think that we need to be aware that we shouldn't be embarrassed about being depressed, that we need to speak to a doctor and get treatment. It certainly is not an uncommon problem to have. Treating hearing loss. How many of you have went to an audiologist and had your hearing tested? Excellent. Very good. Congratulations to those that have, because if you can't hear, you can't remember, right? And it is good to have a baseline. I can even say that I've gotten my hearing tested as well, because it's good to have a baseline and then go back. It's all about your hearing health. We want to continue to socialize and engage. And if we can't hear people, we can't do that. So once you get your hearing tested, and your hearing may require that you wear a hearing aid, then make sure that you wear your hearing aid. Be social with a network. So this is what you're doing by being part of these clubs. And I think that's, and also surrounding yourselves with positive people can make a huge difference in our lives as well. Avoid isolation, loneliness, just, you know, volunteering can make a big piece. That isolation we've just gone through, and some of us are still experiencing that. But I like that, you know, that the whole idea of even how you had mentioned a support group and people, just giving people a phone call, checking in. How are you doing? What is it that I can do to help you can go a long way. Minding your diet. So think about the MIND diet is, you know, reduced amount of salt, but also the Mediterranean diet, which is lean meat, chicken and fish, lots of fruits and vegetables, more vegetables than fruits. So just being aware of what it is that we're putting in our body and how we're keeping our body moving. I always say, how many people drive here? How many people own a vehicle? Okay. So do you ever put sugar in the gas tank of your vehicle? You wouldn't want to do that because your vehicle wouldn't move, right? So think about your bodies as a vehicle and how you take your car in to get serviced. You're going to the doctor's office to be serviced, right? Keep yourself moving. If your car doesn't move, you seize up, right? So keep yourself moving. So this last part of my my presentation today is really just to bring your attention to the important things to know about individuals with Alzheimer's disease. And that is that individuals with a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease need to feel valued. They may be concerned about how the disease will affect them and their families. So it is important to recognize that they may not want to speak about their disease because of the fear of what they're experiencing, but they still need that companionship. So I always say it's about validating a person and their feelings. They strive to maintain an active and independent life. So it's always about once the diagnosis is made, how is it that we can help this person to adapt to their brain changes without completely taking over. They have the same needs as each and every one of us, and they have abilities, skills, and aspirations. So it is important for us, either as a care partner or a person living with dementia, to share the diagnosis with others. If you don't share the diagnosis, people don't know where it is that what's happening or how it is that they can help you. So it is, and for them to get a better understanding and knowledge about the disease so that they can support you, can certainly go a long way. So from the care partner and being able to support a care partner, supporting an individual with Alzheimer's disease, important just to take time to listen and actively listen to the individual. So the care partner may just be picking up the phone and wanting to speak with you. They may not want your advice, but they just need a listening ear, and you could be that. Do little things. They mean a lot. It could be drop a card off, or drop a coffee off, or maybe a casserole that you made. Offer to give the care partner a break. Take the person living with dementia for a car ride, or for a walk, or a tour in the golf cart. Think about what that person enjoyed doing, and how is it that we can still engage them in their everyday activities. Keep in touch. It's a long road. Individuals with Alzheimer's disease can live anywhere from 7 to 20 years with the diagnosis. Become informed. That's the knowledge and understanding of the disease, and stay the course of the disease. So I do want you all to understand that a diagnosis doesn't mean you are dying tomorrow. So keep living, right? It doesn't change you right away. You won't lose your emotional memory. You may not remember who the person is or the details of the experience, but you'll remember how that person made you feel. So for us, that is supporting the person living with dementia. Make that moment a good moment, a memorable moment for the person. You are more than what you can remember. And take that home with you. So what we do, certainly at the Alzheimer's Society of Grey Bruce, we support about 9 memory clinics throughout Grey Bruce. So that means that we have staff that attend these memory clinics and are there at the time of diagnosis. We promote early involvement with education and support programs. And we also help individuals and families in this challenging journey together in an atmosphere of love and understanding. I won't go through the list of programs and services that we do. You can certainly see just on the screen just how many that we have, and we have grown. I've worked with the Alzheimer's Society now for 13 years. I can't believe how many programs and services we've took on since I started with them. So, and it's lovely to see that people are beginning to I guess, break down that stigma a little bit more by reaching out and getting that support. We still have a long ways to go, but I'm glad that we're making that connection and making a difference in people's lives. So the Alzheimer's Society Grey Bruce is a registered charity. Money raised in Grey Bruce stays here to provide information, education, support, and counseling services for individuals, families, and healthcare professionals. So I go in and do a lot of education to nurses in hospitals and in long-term care. And less than 60% of the cost of our budget is funded by government or other sources. So support through donations ensures that together we continue to make a real difference in the quality of life for individuals with dementia and their families and care partners. So think about, I always like to pose this question to you all, because there's really no point in listening to these lectures if you don't apply the information that you've learned. So think about what I've discussed or shared with you today. Think, how will you take action in the prevention of Alzheimer's disease? What will you do? What will you stop or start or continue to do? Thank you. I am happy to answer any questions that people may have. Yes.
How vibrant things affect my attention.
Yeah, so does Alzheimer's disease affect your driving? So this is a big fear people have about getting the diagnosis, right? Because they feel that, oh, if I get diagnosed, then the doctor's going to take away my driver's license. So that's not necessarily the case. It depends on how detected in your cognitive test. So if they feel that the tracking piece is still adequate, that you can still drive. Okay. Now, if your test was indicating that otherwise, then they're going to have to take away your driver's license. So the answer to that is that not all people. But to plan ahead for the changes that may come eventually with the disease post. Okay? Yes.
It's not a question, actually. In my experience, that you do not try to correct someone. If they make some obviously stupid statement, you should be human. Because if you are perfectly correct, then
Yeah. So what this gentleman has shared with us is don't try to correct the person. It's basically live in their reality, right? So wherever they are at. So connect, don't correct. Can you remember that? Yeah. Always connect. So how is it that I can connect with this person? And wherever they happen to be. So, if they're picking apples in the orchard, that's where they happen to be at this point in time. And we're picking apples in the orchard. Or if they need to get those cows in the barn, cows are in the barn, got that looked after. It's really just living in their reality at whatever time and place that they happen to be. Connect, don't correct.
very wonderful presentation, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you.
On one of your church, so you don't use memory loss. There's a personal memory. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, so if I was engaging with you and, I don't know, we were doing an activity, possibly doing a puzzle or listening to music. Then the next time it was when I leave you, then you're feeling pretty good about, I don't know, the experience, but you may not actually remember all the details of the experience. You just remember that, or you just have this feeling good. So that feeling stays with you all day. But the reverse can happen as well. Whereas maybe I had a negative engagement with you. So perhaps I was helping you with your personal care. And so here I am taking off your shirt and I'm not explaining to you exactly what's happening, or I'm telling you, you need to take a shower today, and you're saying, I took a shower already, but I'm arguing with you. And then finally you get in, you take a shower anyway. But that feeling of being upset or not heard remains with you. So by the end of the day, your behavior is like this. You're angry, you're fixated on that emotion, so it stays with you all day. So that's why I say, if you can connect with the person with Alzheimer's disease, make it a special moment, because that moment, that feeling will remain with that individual. And so I'm just saying that it is important to realize, as friends or family members supporting a person living with dementia, don't get fixated on how long you visit with the person. It could be maybe just visit with them for 5 minutes. And then we start to drift off and go to sleep. That 5 minutes could be a special body needs for that person. So they're not looking after the watch and saying, hey, I've only been here for 5 minutes. They have no idea how long. But the time that you do stay, make it special. That's being looked at for brain trouble. Respond. Okay. It certainly can. It certainly can, because again, if you think of the damage, so she's asking if the perception is damaged as a result of an individual being diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. So perception is certainly can be impacted how close or far things are. And that's where you might start to see the person with at a greater follows, right? Doesn't know just how far away that speech is, or goes to bend down something. The item is a lot further down than what it used to be, or they reach to get something, and it's a lot they're missing what it is that they're reaching for. The other piece is the peripheral vision. So keep this in mind. For all of us, normal peripheral vision is wiggle our fingers out to the side and see our fingers wiggling. As we age, our peripheral vision starts to diminish. So it's probably about a 4 to 5. For somebody with Alzheimer's disease, put on some scuba glasses. If you put it on, you actually put your hands like this. Go like this. That's what the person is seeing. So if you're still wearing your scuba glasses, you look down. I can't see if there's any dirt on my shirt, right? So if somebody's reaching, oh, you got, then they're like, what are you reaching for exactly? There's object of opportunity right there. Yeah, so then you might get a spot. Yeah. So be aware that when you're wanting to have a conversation with the person, that you're in their line of vision. Because if you're off to the side, they're not going to see you, and you might startle them. So make sure that you're and it's a safe distance, like social 6 feet apart, right? And then watch our approach. Like how fast we approach that person. We'll hand up, hey, how are you? And wait for them to present their. Okay, so yes, you think about it, your occipital lobe, responsible for your vision, back here. Your eyes, here. There's a lot of wire between here and here. Remember that image of the brain and how it's atrophying? The person is really, really trying hard to work with what still remains in that brain. The other thing that's important to note, we all see in through dimensions. As the disease impacts the individual, if they're watching something on TV, the images on TV may appear as though they're in the room with them because they can't see in 3D anymore. Everything appears black. So depending on what's on TV, it could be very pleasant. Or it could be CSI, somebody just got hurt right in my living. And that could be terrible. And so the thing too, so if you think of those being unable to see in 3 dimensions, if they encounter a staircase, then the stairs look flat. Right? So this is why I say it is really important for us to understand the disease and adapt to these brain changes Because we can make adjustments to make it easier for the individual to navigate their environment. Like if we can color the step, we do on the curves, in the yellow curve, to distinguish where's the curve and where's the road, right? Thinking, understanding the meaning behind the person's behavior is important. Anybody else? Yes. Yes. So I run what's called a first-line learning theory. So that's where she asked if we had courses. So I do a first-line learning theory to educate care partners and people living with dementia when they're newly diagnosed. And as the disease progresses, then it's just specifically for care partners. So it's first thing, living well with first step, living well with memory loss. And then there's a care essentials learning theory. Then we talk about options for care. So we build the difference between retirement home and long-term care. And we talk about care in the later stages. So what does the end of life look like? But John mentioned the program, Memory and Aging is the other program. So that's just for people that are interested about how memory and aging are intertwined and learning the ropes of memory loss for individuals with a diagnosis of non-cognitive impairment. So yeah, there's at the Alzheimer's Society offers all kinds of programs and so encourage people to attend. I also do a learn from your living room session. So you're welcome to go to our website and register for any of those. They're just a 1 hour session once a week. Yeah. Not sure. The expression of the emotion. Yeah. And so she's wondering if the emotions disappear in a person living with dementia. No, the emotion doesn't disappear, but the ability to express that emotion may change. So you see the apathy piece where there's just no facial expression that's coming from the individual. So if I'm sharing some happy news and you're expecting the person to respond with happiness, you may not get them, right? It might be just a flat effect. And being that person, it could be, there's always asking yourself what's the meaning behind the behavior. Did they not understand exactly what I said? Or are they just having difficulty processing what it is that I said? Right? So it's a lot slower to get through. Do I need to say this differently, or is it just the apathy so that's another part of the symptom of the disease, that the emotion is in there, we just don't know how to express that emotion.